Hey gang! Using the promo code MTGMudsta, all caps, will get you 10% off any order over $10 at Flipside Gaming. It'll also get you 10% off any orders of singles at Multizone. And it'll get you 10% off most products at Original Magic Art, with the exceptions of some paintings. If these fine sites don't have what you're looking for, you can also consider using my affiliate link when ordering from TCG Player. And if you'd like to join the Generic Goblin Gang to support this channel, there's a link to my Patreon in the description below. Hey gang, looking to get your hands on a free box of Theros Beyond Death? Well, look no further. Flipside Gaming will be giving one away between December 12th and January 27th. You can enter by using my promo code MTGMudsta on an order of $10 or more, or by sending a self-addressed, stamped envelope or postcard to them. It's one entry per person, and for more information, follow the link below. It's a brand new year, and I've got a brand new game for you featuring the Punt Squad. This week has Kiefer joining us for his first on-camera game, and he's playing his Vaevictus deck, keeping a Verdant Force, a Chaos Warp, a Sepulchral Primordial, Jungle Hollow, Forest, Mountain, and Yavimaya Granger. I am playing Dralnu, keeping Exsanguinate, Mana Vault, Dimir Signet, Tainted Isle, Notion Thief, Beseiju, and Cabal Coffers. Tony is playing Kestia, keeping Shielded by Faith, an Island, a Forest, Utopia Sprawl, Umbra Mystic, Season of Growth, and Unflinching Courage. Scott is testing out Adam's Animar deck, keeping a Raven Familiar, a Forest, Beast Within, Cloud of Fairies, Mystical Tutor, Fierce Empath, and Soul Ring. Kiefer wins the die roll and starts us off. Kiefer plays a tapped Jungle Hollow, gaining 1 life. Scott plays a Forest and casts Soul Ring. I play the Seed of the Synod, cast Mana Vault, and tap the Mana Vault for Dimir Signet. Tony plays his Forest, casting Utopia Sprawl onto it. Moving to turn 2, Kiefer plays a Forest and passes. Scott plays a tap Breeding Pool, passing. I lose 1 life to the Vault on my upkeep, and I play a Tainted Isle in my main phase. I've got another Mana Rock for turn, and drop Talisman of Dominance before passing. Tony plays an Island, and taps his Forest for 2 to cast the Seasons of Growth. Kiefer plays a Mountain, and casts Yavimaya Granger. He goes to find a basic Forest, and passes turn. Scott draws, and cycles his Cloud of Fairies, drawing another card for turn, but has no land to play, and has to pass. I lose 1 to the Vault on my upkeep, and play a tapped Sunken Hollow, passing to Tony. Tony shows me up by playing an untapped Prairie Stream, having enough basics for it, and he has enough to bring out Kestia. He forgets to scry though, and passes. Kiefer responds on his upkeep to the Granger's Echo cost, casting a Chaos Warp on the creature. He shuffles it in, and reveals off the top a Magmatic Force, which is one heck of a trade-up. Kiefer then draws for turn, and he plays a Terminal Moraine as his land for turn, and passes to Scott. At the end of turn, Scott casts Mystical Tutor to find an instant or a sorcery. He reveals a Nature's Lore, and puts it on top. On Scott's upkeep, Kiefer gets a Magmatic Force trigger, and deals 3 to Scott. Scott then draws, and casts Nature's Lore, floating 1 colorless from the Soul Ring. Scott finds a tapped Stomping Ground, and passes. On my upkeep, Kiefer deals 3 to me with his Force trigger, and I take 1 from my vault. I then play out an Urborg, and pass my painful turn to Tony. Tony takes the 3 on his upkeep from Kiefer's Force as well, and plays a tapped Vivid Meadow which comes in with charge counters. He puts an Unflinching Courage onto Kestia, drawing from his Seasons trigger. He heads to combat, bashing Scott for 6 with Kestia, gaining 6 life as she connects, and also draws another card from Kestia attacking. With nothing else, Tony passes. On Kiefer's upkeep, he deals another 3 to Tony with his Magmatic Force and draws for turn. He plays out a Swiftfoot Boots, and pays to equip them onto his Force. Heading to combat, we get real intense as the Force hits Tony for 7, and Tony takes it and has no choice but to like it as well. Kiefer deals 3 to Scott in his upkeep, who draws and passes. On my turn, I also lose 3 to Kiefer's Force on my upkeep, and 1 from my mana vault. Losing 4 on my upkeep isn't great though, but do you know what is? Cabal Coffers with an Urborg out. I then pass turn. Tony loses 3 on his upkeep to Kiefer's Force as well, and do you sense a pattern? Kiefer then drops a bit of a bombshell on us.
Can I be honest? Didn't know this card was in my deck.
Tony then plays a tapped Tranquil Cove, gaining 1 life, and puts Bear Umber onto Kestia, and with the draw trigger from his Seasons on the stack, I flash in Notion Thief. This lets me steal the draw, and moving to combat, Tony swings Kestia at Kiefer, dealing 8 damage, gaining 8 life, and then being forced to draw a card, which is replaced by my drawing a card. He also gets to untap his lands thanks to the Bear Umbra. Tony then casts an Umbra Mystic in his main phase, and scries 1 from the Seasons as it comes in, keeping the card on top. He then enchants the Mystic with Shielded by Faith, and the Seasons forces Tony to draw, which is to say, replaced by my drawing a card thanks to the Notion Thief. Kiefer deals 3 to Tony in his upkeep with his Magmatic Force trigger, and draws. He plays a tapped Rugged Highlands, gaining 1 life, and moves to combat. The Force heads at me for 7, which I take rather than lose my Notion Thief, and Kiefer passes. On Scott's upkeep, Kiefer deals 3 to the Notion Thief to appease Tony. Scott then draws, and plays out a Raven Familiar, looking at his top 3. He puts 1 to hand, 1 on top, and 1 on the bottom. He then pays 2 for an Elvish Visionary, drawing a card. Scott then passes, discarding Momir Vig at the end of turn. Before moving from the end of turn, I cast Forbidden Alchemy, keeping 1 of the cards from the top 4, and binning a notable Isochron Scepter. I take another 1 from my vault, and Kiefer decides on my upkeep to deal 3 to Tony. I then draw for turn, and play Darkwater Catacombs, and I pass to Tony. Tony loses another 3 to the Force on his upkeep, draws, and plays a Vivid Grove. Kiefer also decides to sacrifice his Terminal Moraine to find a basic, and Tony then pays a ton of mana for Archetype of Imagination, which has me countering the spell with Arcane Denial. We'll get a delayed draw trigger on Kiefer's upkeep, and Tony then moves to combat. He swings Kestia at Kiefer again, dealing another 8, gaining another 8, and drawing a card from Kestia's trigger. Plus, he gets to untap his lands thanks to the Bear Umbra. In his second main phase, Tony then plays out Flitterstep Eidolon and scries again. He keeps whatever the card is on top, and taps out for an Octopus Umbra, drawing a card from the Seasons trigger and passing turn. Kiefer deals 3 to Tony on his upkeep, and draws. He now has enough mana to cast a Vaevictus, and passes. Scott's upkeep has Kiefer dealing 3 to Tony again, and we then say goodbye to the Raven's Familiar because Scott won't pay for its echo cost. Scott then pays 1 red, green, and blue for an Animar, and tabbing 2 for his Soul Ring, casts a Painter's Servant. This gives Animar a +1/+1 counter from the Painter's Servant being cast, and as it enters, Scott has the Servant make all cards become black in addition to their normal colors. Scott then passes, and at the end of turn, I cast Dig Through Time, exiling a few cards from my yard. I keep 2 of the 7, and then move to my turn. I lose another 1 to my Mana Vault trigger, and Kiefer deals 3 to Tony. I then cast Soul Ring into my main phase, and then a Toxic Deluge, paying 7 life into this, and the board gets wiped. I then play my pair of Swiftfoot Boots, and pass to Tony. Tony draws for turn, and plays a Plains. He recasts Kestia, scrying 1 as she comes in, and bottoms a card, and passes turn. Kiefer draws for turn, and pays all of his manas for a Rampaging Baloth. Scott draws for turn as well, and rolls out Animar again before passing turn. I lose another 1 to my vault, which at this point has dealt nearly as much damage as Kiefer's Magmatic Force did to me, and I play a High Market as my land for turn. I then cast Dralnu, and put the boots onto my commander before passing to Tony. Tony plays a Simic Guildgate, and puts Imperial Armor onto his commander. He draws from the Seasons trigger, and swings Kestia at me. He draws from Kestia's trigger for attacking with a creature that's enchanted or an enchantment creature, and I declare no blocks for obvious reasons with Dralnu being my only creature. Tony then removes counters from his Vivid Land and bestows at flash speed a boon Satyr onto Kestia. This draws him a card with the Seasons, and with all said and done, Kestia then connects and I take 11 commander damage. Tony then passes. Kiefer draws for turn and pays 3 for Rhythm of the Wilds. He then pays 2 mana for Ashnod Silex, and he puts the boots onto the Baloth before passing to Scott. Scott plays a Flooded Strands and then a Siren Stormtamer, putting another +1/+1 counter onto Animar and reducing the cost of his creatures by 1 colorless. He then taps some mana for a Bloodbraid Elf, floating 1 mana from his Soul Ring, and this gives Animar another counter from casting a creature spell, before resolving his Cascade. He reveals a Spellseeker off the top, casting the creature and gaining another counter on Animar, and as it enters, he gets to go and find an instant or a sorcery that costs 2 or less. He reveals a Neoform, putting it to hand. Scott also uses the time to lose 1 life as he sacrifices his Flooded Strand to find a land. He grabs an island that comes in untapped. With his still floating colorless and the island, Scott is then able to cast the reduced costing Peregrine Drake. Since I know how fast Animar can go off, with even just a few counters, I countered the Drake with a mana drain. Scott still does get another counter on Animar though, which is a small consolation. Heading to combat, Animar then hits Tony for 5, and Scott passes turn. I lose 1 to the Vault trigger because it's worked so well all the other turns before this, and draw for turn. I play out a Bloodstained Mire, and tap the Mire because I have an Urborg out for Entomb, and go to find a card to put to the bin. I put to Yard Decree of Pain, and then tap Dralnu to give it flashback. I then tap my coffers to pay for the cost and have 1 floating black, and wipe the board. I draw 7 cards because Decree cares about what it destroys, and not what dies, so it counts commanders as well. I then cast Frantic Search, drawing 2, discarding 2, and then untapping 3 lands, one of which is Cabal Coffers. I then make another 9 black mana with 10 black floating in my pool now, and then make 2 blue to help cast Turnabout. I untap all of my lands again, and then cast Snapcaster Mage to flash the Turnabout back again. I make a ton more mana at this point with my Cabal Coffers, and finish the table off with a massive Exsanguinate that I'd had since my opening hand. Game review time. So I finally see some of the additions that Tony's been making to his Kestia deck have paid off. She was a huge threat for most of the game, and Seasons of Growth did a great deal of scrying away bad cards and drawing them good ones. I think my Dralnu deck was able to fly under some people's radars, mostly because all I was doing was dealing with board states and finding answers. I was at very low life total near the end, and I could have easily died from Animar, but I think Scott wanted me around so that I'd be able to deal with Tony if he got out of hand again. It's hard to say whether or not Scott kept a greedy hand, or whether or not it was the deck, because it was still being tested at the time of filming this. Kiefer's deck was also particularly slow this game. I've seen it go off much quicker, but fortunately for him, he was able to get that lucky Magmatic Force off the top of his library. That did a lot of damage and kept a lot of us in check. I think he probably should have focused a bit more on Tony, but he did stop him from gaining too much life and getting too far ahead of everyone else. Please be sure to tune in every Monday and Thursday at 11 AM Eastern Standard Time for a guaranteed new video. You can also follow me on Twitter at MTGMudsta. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/MTGMudsta. And lastly, you can check me out when I stream at twitch.tv/MTGMudsta. This video is brought to you in support by my patrons. If you're looking for a way to help out the channel, please be sure to visit the link below. Thank you all for watching this video, and don't forget, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.